Welcome, everyone. We are really glad you are here. Today, we're talking about something that comes up constantly in conversations with CPG teams, and that is how do you actually build testing into your product process? So, not just as a one-off before launch, but as something that's really an embedded part of the culture, and woven into how you innovate from the start. So, to dig into that, I am joined by the wonderful Sydney Perotti from Once Upon a Farm. For those who don't know, Once Upon a Farm is an organic childhood nutrition brand focused on helping parents foster a lifelong love of healthy, real food for their kids. And I can say from experience, they genuinely walk the walk when it comes to consumer-informed innovation. For our guests, just so you know, please drop any questions using the Q&A functionality at the bottom of your screen there, and we will take a look at them at the end of this conversation. But Sydney, we are so glad to have you here, and I would love if you could share just a little bit about yourself, what you do at Once Upon a Farm, and a little bit about your background and insights.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. As Amanda said, my name is Sydney. I am the Senior Manager of Consumer Insights here at Once Upon a Farm. I am quickly approaching my 2 years at Once Upon a Farm, and I'm super excited to be here. We have such an amazing brand, and really our organization stands for so much and really invests in so much in consumer insights. And so I love being here. I feel so supported in my role and trying to build up this function within the organization. But I've been working in insights for almost my entire career. In 2018, I started on the insights team at PepsiCo, sort of made my way into working on smaller, more emerging brands. And I continue to just foster this real love of research and really using that to make the most out of every launch, every reformulation, every time we change packaging or adjust positioning on something. I feel like research can touch all different functions across the organization, not just marketing or not just R&D. And so one of the reasons why I love this function in the first place is because I get to kind of get my fingers in everything that everybody's working on. I love supporting sales. I work probably the closest with marketing at Once Upon a Farm, but I'm in conversations with R&D and our leadership team, and everybody here just loves insights. And so it's a great place to be. And like I said, I just feel so supported in this role. So I'm excited to talk more about it today.
Oh, that's wonderful. We have seen that with Once Upon a Farm tenfold. So speaking of sort of the different places that you touch along the product life cycle, I'd love to chat with you a little bit about your innovation philosophy specifically. Once Upon a Farm is obviously a brand that really leads with the consumer. Can you give us a quick picture of how your team approaches new product development and what that pipeline looks like, sort of from ideation to prototype?
Yeah, of course. So I think at Once Upon a Farm, we do a really great job of balancing intuition with information. So a lot of times what that looks like is we're the first step of our research project our process is already pretty in-depth, specific concept testing with a specific goal in mind. I would say the team at Once Upon a Farm is so creatively minded and so able to really identify what the next big bet for us is going to be, that we feel really strong in our sense of intuition. Of course, we're like a founder-led brand. So Cassandra, who's leads up our R&D practices, she's really kind of at the forefront thinking forward about new categories and new places where we can make a big impact. And from there, we take all of that really rich intuition that comes from our leadership team and we go into, okay, so now what is the best way that we can really bring this to life and take this to market? So we typically start with, like I said, really detailed concept testing that coming out of that, we really are able to understand, okay, what is our best way in? How can we tweak the positioning? How can we really hone in on a specific functionality? how can we adjust the messaging in order to, of course, like bring something to life that is really impactful and really resonates with a lot of our parents and our target audience out there. So the first step is already sort of deeper than I feel like at a lot of organizations. In my last role, we would, start the process with a laundry list of categories, of potential categories that we could launch into and really take a screener type of approach. But I would say at Once Upon a Farm, we really lean on that intuition as the first step and then go into, getting down to the nuts and bolts and things in that second step of consumer research. And from there, we will get as much information as we possibly can. And what I like to say is we kind of cross-functionally dissect it. So our R&D team isn't the only one who looks at the concept results. Our marketing team aren't the only ones who look at them, but everybody does across sales, across even finance too. Like we really want to make sure that the proposition that we are working towards bringing to life is checking off all of our consumers' boxes. And that really takes everybody cross-functionally to kind of get into that. And then after that, it really becomes a brief writing process. So we take all of that rich information, and a lot of times it is a concept test, but typically with concept tests we do a lot of attitude and usage research as well, to really kind of understand like what are the key occasions, what are the current perceptions of the category, so we can really understand like how to optimize our launch, not just from a physical product standpoint, but from the competitive standpoint, from our like how we can embrace the equities within our brand that we're already performing really strongly against. And then we really kind of hand that off to R&D, and they will do their absolute best to bring to life like that exact thing that we've all aligned on. And then from there, we will go into, and it really kind of depends on the weight of this new product launch, whether or not we feel like this is going to be a huge bet and a huge opportunity for us, or just a couple line extensions off of a line that's working for us currently. And so if it is a really big bet and there is a lot of weight that's going into this launch, sometimes we'll then go into product packaging testing. We'll do messaging testing every once in a while, but more often than not, if this is just sort of like a standard launch, we'll take that next step into the physical product testing. And what I always like to say is like, if we don't have time to make any changes to the product after we get the physical product test results back, then we shouldn't do it at all. And so it really is sort of the purpose of that next and sort of final step before launch with the physical product testing is to just make sure that we are bringing to life the concept that performed really well in that initial round of testing. I think getting to a winning concept is one thing, but really bringing that to life and, making sure that it lives up to the expectations that the concept set are really, really important. So most times those are kind of like the two key pieces of research that I like to do. And that's kind of what our life cycle looks like before launching a new product.
Interesting. So it's pretty much consistently we're going to start with a concept test, no matter
Mhm.
what. Yeah.
Yeah, we love a concept test here at Once Upon a Farm. We run a lot of them, but I think that the way that we approach them is also really unique. I think a lot of, and we lean on you guys a lot for that too. I think what really makes the way that we approach concept testing different from what I've seen at other places is that we don't just take the typical concept test template of asking like, okay, what's the purchase intent? How believable is this? How unique is this? How, new and
Right.
different is this from what's already out there? And the reason why we love working with you guys so much is because we like to ask those sort of obscure questions about category usage and parent perceptions and connecting all of that to age of child and stage of development. And we get really detailed with our concept testing. And honestly, I lean on you guys so much for that too, because I think what is really important when it comes to doing like a standard concept test is like the questions that you ask, and making sure that we're asking the right questions in order to, get to like hand off a brief to the rest of our teams to bring something to life. Because the more detailed we can be about what's really going to impact and get that person to buy our product is, the most important part. So.
Yes, absolutely. We have one quick question in the Q&A that I want to ask because it is very relevant to this conversation. So they said to clarify, the product is already developed with concept testing, or are you testing thoughts before the product is developed?
Yes, that's a good question. So we already have an idea of like a territory that we want to sort of enter into. So that's either a category, or if we're seeing, for example, like protein trends, we'll understand like, okay, we know we want to enter into protein. So what concepts can we test within that territory to really make sure that we're not just entering protein like anybody else, that we're bringing something really new and unique to the table. That's also something that we can deliver on. So I would say we bring concept. We definitely don't have physical product or anything like that, but we more so have like general ideas of territories that we feel really strongly could be big opportunities for us. And then we go into concept testing as sort of like a next step to go deeper into, okay, if we're going to enter into a category, we have three ideas of ways in, and we'll test each of those three ideas in much more detail to understand, okay, it's not just about entering this new category, but it's about showing up in this category in this way. And now we can sort of get to the next step and go move forward with product development.
Yes, absolutely. I think sort of along those lines, working you at Once Upon a Farm and companies that work in kids' food or baby food or even something like pet products have a unique challenge to you, right? And that's that you are not just, you don't just need to win with the purchaser of the product. You need to win with the person who's using the product or the pet who's using the product, right? So in your case, the stakes are high because getting it wrong really matters. And we have a couple different angles we need to look at in terms of how we think of product success. So I'm curious if that raises the stakes for you in with regards to how you think about testing, and then also how do you mitigate that risk?
Yes, that's a great question. And I think working in kids and pets, like you said, that it's so big to get it right. And we really, as we've thought about our growth opportunities for the future, we see like our consumer base as almost like two connected but distinct audiences. We have our baby toddler parents and our big kid parents, we like to call them, which are sort of early elementary school aged kids. And getting it wrong with each of those audiences looks very different. And so I definitely think it's worth sort of understanding like for my specific audience or for my for this key demographic of ours, like what really does getting it wrong look like. And from the work that we've done with you guys, that we've really been able to sort of nail this and understand exactly what we need to know. I talk so highly about like the highlighter community because you guys truly have such an amazing panel of highlighters who have so much to share and such great thoughts and are really like thinking deeply about when are thinking deeply when they take the surveys and when they engage with testing. And so we've done a couple of rounds of one-on-one consumer interviews where I'll moderate and just sit down and talk to people. And through that research, we've really been able to understand why getting it right is so important. And what we've been able to learn is that for our baby toddler parents, they have just this huge fear of like getting things wrong with their baby or toddler. This is a really, for a lot of them, it's a new phase of their life. It is a completely new era for their families. And a lot of parents don't have a firsthand experience sort of with feeding development and those key milestones. And so brand trust and ingredient quality and where we source ingredients and having all of our, clean label claims and non-GMO organic, like those all really matter to these parents because we've seen that baby toddler parents are pretty inelastic when it comes to how they approach food for their kids. They see their kids as these like pure little bundles of love, and they don't want to give them anything that's really artificial or chemically processed or anything like that. And so showing up in a way that really gives them the reassurance and the confidence that they need to feel like they're approaching food with their babies and toddlers is super, super important. And I'm always surprised when I sit down one-on-one with these consumers and highlighters because they'll say things like, my baby is 6 or 7 months old and we're making that transition from exclusively milk to solids. And I just want to set my child up for success and for them to have a really healthy relationship with food into adulthood. So it's like these parents are like already thinking about their kids' relationships with foods right when they're sort of making that transition to solids. And I think when we think about that, it's really interesting because I think everybody can kind of coin like millennials as foodies and Gen Z is like bringing their own sort of twist into the food and beverage industry. And so to see these two generations sort of come up as parents in the world is really interesting because they're already thinking about food just so early on in the development process of their kids. As their kids get older, what we've seen is that they really do start to loosen up a little bit about the guardrails that they've set in their household for food and beverage. So they understand that their kids are going to school, they're going to be trading snacks at the lunch table, they're going to a friend's house and having candy. So a lot of those sorts of initial anxieties about wanting to get the cleanest, most pure things in their baby toddler stomachs start to kind of fall by the wayside a little bit. And what really becomes sort of the center of decision making when it comes to these parents is value and making
Mhm.
sure that they're not buying something that's going to go to waste. I think that something that a lot of bigger kid, early elementary school parents deal with is sort of like the brown food phase of like kids only want chicken nuggets and things like that. And so picky eating is definitely like a big concern for these parents. And so if we can bring something to market that parents feel really good about feeling and that kids ask for again and again, then we're definitely doing our job. One thing that we've also seen with these bigger kid parents is that there's so many more occasions for food and snack in their lives during this moment because their kids are engaging in after school activities, they're playing sports, there's a birthday party every other weekend. Like there's so many more times throughout their week where they're reaching for a snack or they're bringing snacks to share with the family. So value becomes so important. And as we think about growing our business with these bigger kids and entering into some of these bigger kid lunchbox categories, we're thinking pack size, we're thinking channel strategy, emphasizing club. And I think that's why we see a lot of parents, as their kids get bigger, sort of shift from primarily shopping in grocery to shopping at Costco and shopping at Walmart and Target and leaning into those more big box solutions. So I feel like, yes, exactly what you said. It matters a lot getting it wrong, but I feel like as much as you can do the work to get it right and understand sort of what that looks like, I think the better off that you'll be.
Yeah, that was a wonderful explanation. Thank you. Along the lines of getting it wrong, I am curious if you can sort of walk us through a moment where testing early in the process saved you from going down the wrong path. So this can be just from your career in insights. What would have happened had you skipped testing and not had the data to inform you that actually your hypothesis may not have been correct?
Yes. I have a good example that I can't quite share all the details yet because this line of products hasn't launched yet. But we did do physical product testing with enough time to really make the decision of, okay, are we ready to launch this item or do we need some more time to fine tune the recipe? And this was another one of those projects and launches where, this is a completely new line for us. This is something that we internally are putting a lot of weight on to help us achieve some of our goals. And so we need to make sure that this launch is going to go well. And so we did some physical product testing, and what we found is that our hero flavor, while the taste was great, we definitely had some textural issues that emerged the longer the item was sort of in its packaging. So while we were doing some benchtop testing, sort of like with R&D, it seemed like everything was fine. But in the packaging process and as the product sort of sat in the packaging for a little bit longer, we were quickly able to identify through the data that we had a serious problem. And we actually pushed this launch very significantly to make sure that we got that right. And I think that this is such a good example of how like the highlighter community is like and their families are just really able to pick up on some of those nuances and really, make it clear to us that we have a problem that we need to fix. And I think that this is just it's normal as a part of the product development process. But I think that one thing that we do here at Once Upon a Farm is we really prioritize taste over everything else. And when we think about growing with our big kid audience, texture, as many people who have kids on the call can probably agree, texture is like a huge trigger for kids when they're trying a new food or when they're eating something. So if the flavor could be great, but if the texture isn't right, it's not going to fly. And so that was also a key learning for us that texture, when we think about launching items for those early elementary school big kids, is something that we need to be very, very hyper focused on, because it's really everything. And like I said, like if these kids, if their parents buy them a premium product from Once Upon a Farm and the kid takes one sip and doesn't like it, now that's a huge waste of money, and mom and dad are never going to try us again. So it kind of goes back to like
Yes.
what wrong looks like as well, because there's all these sort of little nuances that I feel like you can learn from testing, and now texture has become something that we're much more we want to be much more aware of when we launch products.
That's really, yes. I have some questions later on actually that are brewing when it comes to hero flavors or hero SKUs. But first, I would like to know, on the flip side of that, what are some wins that have helped you defend the ROI of testing, and the like importance of consumer research to whether it's like internal stakeholders, well, it would probably be internal stakeholders. And I know you probably don't have to defend it that much at Once Upon a Farm, but have you ever had to?
Yes, I will say, like, Once Upon a Farm, and I mentioned this in the beginning, we are an organization that invests so much into research and really believe that consumer insights and product testing and all of the testing that we do is really worth it. That said, I think that one thing that really helps us defend ROI is teaching people something new. I think that again, it goes back to getting really creative with your questionnaires and getting really like thinking outside of the box. Because I think that our leadership team at Once Upon a Farm and many of the other leadership teams at other emerging food and brand and all brand industries, like everybody has so much experience in their field. So if you can use the opportunity to do research and actually teach your leadership team something new, the ROI already speaks for itself. And I think that I always really try and do that whenever, if we're doing a concept test, again, like I'm not just going to run your sort of typical concept or typical A&U test and ask people, what brands do you buy? What categories do you buy? But I will go around cross-functionally and I'll kind of let people know, hey, I'm going to be running this test among these category users. Do you have any questions? And if I'm in a meeting with somebody on sales, hey, like, do you have any customer meetings coming up? I'm going to be running a test that really focuses on this. And I think that sort of approach really helps defend ROI. And it's not necessarily like, oh, this piece of research, we followed we followed exactly what it said, and then this launch was super successful. But it's more so sort of like an ongoing process for me, at least, where I'm really trying to constantly prove the value of research to not just the key stakeholder who, is the one that most interested in the research, but to everybody, because then you really get like total enterprise buy-in on your research, and you have more people asking like, hey, if we have any extra money in the budget, like it would be super helpful if we could run this. And like I love doing stuff like that because I think that any opportunity to run a test is an opportunity to teach somebody something new. And like I said, like we have all of these like super experienced leaders that are like really leading the charge and giving us amazing direction when it comes to developing new products and reforming current products. But like having that opportunity to like answer a really tough question or teach them something new is the best way that I feel like I've been able to defend the ROI on research.
Absolutely. And we see that at Highlight a lot. Sometimes we'll work with more disruptive brands or smaller brands or newer brands that maybe don't have a super built out insights function. They come to us with their first project, and it's a really well designed study. And suddenly they share the data out with their team and it sparks all of these ideas, right? Maybe it was actually for marketing, but suddenly it's like, well, what can R&D do, about what we're learning? And it does exactly what you said, that enterprise buy-in.
Yes, exactly. I think that's so important. And like it can get a little bit crazy sometimes, but like even when I'm working on questionnaires, like I will share that questionnaire with everybody, that has some sort of question surrounding whatever the research is focused on. And I think it's like it shows good partnership from my perspective of just not, like technically consumer insights falls under the marketing umbrella, but like I think that consumer insights can really deliver like enterprise level value. And so I think like as much as you can bring in people cross-functionally and start to connect the dots, the more success you'll have in running more research projects, getting more budget for your research projects, and whatnot. So
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about defending ROI for research, I have seen there is a place, I think a time and a place for different kinds of testing, right? And one of them is, for instance, employee testing, which we actually do support at Highlight. And then, of course, there's consumer testing with like a panel and maybe a big one with large sample size. What would you say is the time and the place for those types of testing?
yes, that's a good question. I think like as I've come to really take ownership over like our research budget and how we allocate things, I think that balancing that is super important. I really also try and, like I said in the beginning, like make sure that at Once Upon a Farm, like we're balancing our intuition with information. Not every single decision throughout the product development process needs an entire research study around it. Like I said, sometimes we'll do messaging and claims research, sometimes we won't. Sometimes we'll do packaging research, sometimes we won't. And so I think that those sorts of like smaller things, like sometimes packaging and messaging, or like if we are exploring shapes for like we have puffs out there and they're in the shapes of stars, but if we were considering launching new shapes or something like that, that would be something where it's like, okay, we can lean on our employee panel, or we are in the position where we have a really loyal base of monthly subscribers of Once Upon a Farm, and so we will leverage that. We will leverage them as well. Of course, because they are very loyal subscribers, they're going to be a little bit more biased, and so we have to kind of keep that in mind. But I think that as an emerging brand, like I don't have all of the money in the world to spend on research. And so I really try and make sure that any big decisions around really big product launches, or like I said, like products that are holding a lot of weight and are, heavily impacting our growth plans in the future, those types of decisions, I think you should always invest in research. I think there's lots of methodologies out there that you can use to get what you need answered. But all of the smaller things, like lean on your intuition, lean on your family at home. I think even can be given that where we are in baby and kids. I think some of those things you can make a good call that I don't think is gonna marginally like put you at a disadvantage with some things. But I would say it really just depends on how much weight this launch is holding in your future plans and at your organization.
Yep, absolutely. I know that you mentioned you have many stakeholders in different departments that you share findings with and that you seek input from. And so I'm curious exactly how does it look to actually act on the data that you get back? So let's say you run a concept test or you run an in-home usage test. You have the data, you have the story. How do you share that out exactly? And how does it make its way into decisions about what moves forward and what doesn't? Who gives it the go, no go?
Yeah, so I would say it sort of depends on the research project. So if we're doing physical product testing, I think that the way that we work here at Once Upon a Farm is that I will take all of the data, and I will take the sort of final report that we get from the research, and I will sort of do my best to comb through it. And then I will very quickly, like typically within a day or two, flip that over to like the key stakeholders. And I think at Once Upon a Farm, we have a small enough team where getting everybody in the room is pretty easy for us. And so I think that you just what I will typically do is either like write up a summary and attach the data book, or like a lot of times with highlights, we'll just export the PowerPoint. But I always include sort of my summary, because I think, yes, like the quantitative data that we get from research is super valuable and can give you very clear direction on which packaging does better or which flavors are going to perform better in market. But really, like, you have to add the business context that you are aware of to every single thing that you share out with anybody. You can't expect somebody from R&D to take a look at the research results and understand exactly what to do next. And so I typically will just deep dive into the research, slice the data a bunch of different ways. I actually love in the highlight tool how you can easily slice and dice different segments and like, filter responses and whatnot. So I will do all of that work sort of on my own, or with like, a couple other key people, just so that I'm not sort of in a silo doing it, but a very small group of just really internalizing the data. And then I will, write up a pretty short key summary that's just like highlights the top four main findings from the research, what direction we feel really strongly in, but then also like what are the main takeaways and what are the next steps and implications. And a lot of times that's not just go with concept A instead of concept B, but it's like, share this finding with our salespeople, share this finding with R&D, share this finding with like the marketing team, because it really can impact like how we are going to communicate about this new product launch and put together like an entire campaign. So a lot of times, like in my first summary, I'm going to explicitly call out like all of the different cross-functional people that I think should be pulled in. And typically there's really no problem with that. And then another thing that I think is really something strong that we do here at Once Upon a Farm is I will send weekly summaries to my CMO about what key findings from research did we get back this week, what key trends did you identify? I spend a lot of my time in our panel data looking at household penetration, buy rate, repeat rate. So it's like I will really try and connect all of those dots and share with her a weekly summary, so that I know like the most important things are making their way all the way up to the folks in our C-suite who are going to know sort of what to do with the information. And like I said, I feel really lucky here that so many people on our leadership team are like, okay, this is what the research said. Like, well, this is how we're going to like farmify it and really bring it to life through this function. But I think like honestly, a lot of that comes from me too. Like I think that adding my point of view and even sometimes like taking a risk and saying like, hey, like I know that this isn't really what we've been talking about as it relates to this product launch, but like the data is really, really strong in this direction. So it's worth a conversation, and it's worth even just acknowledging that this is a trend that we're seeing in a category or whatnot. And so I will sometimes sort of put myself out there. And the worst thing that, you can hear is like, we totally hear you, but like given XYZ, we're gonna like move forward this way. And if we need to make a change, we will. But I think like even like as much as you can, just like say what you need to say, like even if it's a little polarizing or controversial, because I think that type of thinking really goes a long way with research. Because like I said, like you can look at the quantitative data, but like nobody is going to think any bigger than that if you don't take that first step in showing them really what's important.
Right. And I think it's really interesting that you mentioned you sharing out some of the findings with sales. I think a lot of times when we think about market research, we think about R&D or we think about marketing. But the idea of giving your sales team, tools of this is what people care about right now. We may not actually use this data to like make any major changes on pack or with our product, but be sure to talk about this. I think that's very astute. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, marketing and sales work really closely at Once Upon a Farm, and honestly, I've been a part of sales meetings, and I think that this is something that also really goes a long way with our customers too. Like like if we're saying, if we're in a meeting with Walmart and we're saying like, hey, we ran a survey with people who primarily purchase this category at Walmart, like that goes a long way with them too. And what I've found, specifically at my last company is like that is super, super valuable to them because a lot of times like buyers don't always have all the research, all the resources to run research themselves. So anything that we can give them like incremental on top of, sales data, point of sales data, whatnot, really goes a long way. So I've always felt like sales is a great audience for all of the research that we do, because I think that A, like it fosters really great relationships with our customers, and B, like our account managers and our sales team is like are constantly in conversations with our with their buyers and the teams over at the customers, and so really just keeping them armed with new news to share, or like, hey, we recently launched this and like we just found this trend report that really supports sort of the direction that we're going in here. Like even those little small things I think go a really long way. And I spent a little bit of time in my career as a category manager. And I just feel like in any story that you're telling from a sales point of view, like there is a piece of research somewhere that can really bolster that. And I think that again, like the highlighter community always provides us with like amazing quotes. Like we do the video responses with you guys too, and like we'll include a clip of that in a sales deck. Like I think that it's really great to partner with sales. I think that they are a great sort of audience for all sorts of research.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mhm.
Pivoting a little bit to talk about your roadmap, your testing roadmap in general. I know we've talked about innovation, right? So concept testing, and then sort of starting with concept testing, working from there.
Mhm.
I would love to ask a little bit about um, what we call it highlight renovation. So this is sort of what I was saying when I was like, I want to chat a little bit more about the hero SKUs, because sometimes I think a lot of energy gets put towards innovation and product launches, but maybe not enough on maintaining, or if we see that it's not doing well in the market, suddenly sales have plummeted. How do you react to that?
Yes, that is a great question because when I've working in insights, it's really hard to at the very beginning of the year to figure out how you're going to allocate your entire budget or like your credits or however you're sort of managing your consumer insights resources. What it like we could say we want to do this many packaging tests and we want to do this many in-home usage tests, but like then once things actually start to happen and products actually start to get developed, like the timelines are going to change, a submission date is going to get moved. Suddenly we don't have time to do any of this research, but like this huge business question came out of nowhere and we have to get it answered. So now we have to do research on that. And so typically, like the way that it's worked at Once Upon a Farm to sort of think about research road mapping is what products are we launching? And like, do we, and like, how much do we, how much resources do we need to put into new products launches? And then like, how much do we need to save for core research? And I always like to over save some credits and resources for core research because as you said, like, it's so, so important for brands to make sure that they're maintaining a healthy core. We've partnered with you guys in the last year on doing physical product testing on a core line of products. And from that research, we have been able to learn so many things. We did, it was a great, great sort of phased out research project where we did in-home physical product testing followed by one-on-one interviews with people who were in that original iHut. So
Mhm.
we got to actually sit down with them and talk with them for an hour about like tell us about like what your child said, when they were having this flavor or what their immediate reaction was to this packaging. And with surveys you're pretty limited to like a 20-ish minute cap, and so with one-on-one interviews it's a really, really great way to really supplement that research, and we were able to learn so much about how to make improvements and optimize a really core piece of our business that really acts as like the foundation of Once Upon a Farm. And that has really set us up for some great success to come in the future. But I think that it's so important. I feel like at organizations like successful innovation launches are like few and far between to begin with. And so if you're going to invest research dollars into an innovation launch, or you're going to invest in maintaining your core and keeping that healthy, I would choose core every time, because that is the foundation of your business. And a lot of like emerging brands in our position, we can't afford to have our core sort of slip through the cracks. I don't think many brands can do that either, or just sort of like exist off of new innovation launch versus over after new innovation launch. It really comes from maintaining that healthy core and supporting that core with new and innovation launches. And so
Yeah.
we put a lot of resources into making sure that we have a healthy core. You can look back in O Farm history, but we've so many times changed the packaging, changed the logo, like updated it to be modern with new consumers and new parents. I think that parents now, 10 years later, after Once Upon a Farm was founded by Cassandra, looks totally different from, when it did in its early days. But it's a great thing, because parents now, millennial Gen Z parents, are so much different than Gen X parents. And so I think that sort of constant evolution of your core is can be really, really powerful, and give you a great foundation and a great base to then supplement with innovation research that's only going to, help grow your business from there.
Absolutely. I could not agree more, based on what I have seen. We have a couple questions in the chat that I would love to get to really quickly before we hop. And one of them has to do with, I would say, roadmap as well, actually, or sort of product development cycle. And that is, are you mining trends and data to decide what areas you want to go into? Um, so I think what we mean by that is, as opposed to like a consumer study that's specific to a concept that you're testing, are you monitoring large scale consumer trends?
Yes, absolutely. So we're definitely monitoring all the trends. We are participating in protein. We obviously have, in addition to a lot of our core pouches, we have functional lines as well that support gut health. And I mentioned protein already, but immunity health and, brain development, all of those things. So we definitely stay up to date on all of those trends. I would say that one specific trend is never completely dictating like a direction that we go, but it really just acts as more of like a question to us of, is this somewhere that makes sense that we're going to participate in? And if so, like, how can we bring that to life? And I think this goes back into that intuition piece of like, our entire team is staying up to date on like what's going on in our categories and in baby kid and all of that. And it's really just, we really, again, use our intuition to understand like, where are the best places for like O-Farm to participate in. And I think that we have like a very unique brand identity, and like we like to O-Farmify things quite a bit. And so it really comes down to, for us, like, okay, of all of these trends out there, where can we just add our own special sort of something into this category and not just be like a me too. I think that's something that we are pretty averse to, is that we don't want to just launch something really similar because somebody else did and it's going really well for them. We want to stay true to who we are, and really use that as the basis for all of the sort of considerations that we would put into concept testing as like a first step.
Absolutely. And one last question in the chat that I think is really relevant to a lot of people here, and that is, what are the key skills we need to develop to grow our career in consumer insights? And how does it look currently with AI taking up so much space?
This is a good question. I'm probably going to have a controversial answer, but I think AI is really helpful in a lot of ways for me. I think that it is. I think that sometimes like some research platforms can be kind of limiting when it comes to how you are slicing and dicing data and what you're able to export and all of that. And I think AI is a great way to sort of take like all of your raw responses from a survey, upload it, and then just kind of like go back and forth with it. I think that is something that is like a really, really great way to practice like flexing your own muscles of asking really good questions and trying to think like, okay, is this segment of people like perceiving this like drastically differently? And if so, if they are, okay, well then how did they answer this question? And like that is a lot of like the work with AI that I do in my role in consumer insights. What I don't necessarily lean into as much is like AI persona testing. We have like played around with a couple different tools, and I call me old fashioned, I guess. I love like really leaning on real people, real parents, real consumers. As much as I think that quantitative research, like concept testing and IHUT testing, can be of great value to us, I find so much more value in qualitative testing. And while it might take longer because you're sitting through 13 hours moderating interviews with real people, the actual insights that you get, I find are so much more valuable. So I'm a huge proponent of continuing to do research with real people, but use AI to make that research more creative. Or I think AI is also a really great way of like, if you have a really complex business question being asked to you that you need to figure out with the survey, figure out like and work with AI to understand like what are some really like creative questions that we can ask and how can we sequence them into really getting an answer to that question. So I think that supplementing kind of like what I'm already doing is really helpful with AI. But as it comes to the actual testing, I will test with real people every time.
Oh, I I understand, Sydney. Thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation. We have really enjoyed learning from you and learning about everything you're doing at Once Upon a Farm. What a wonderful research culture you have there. So thank you all for joining. If you would like to learn more about how Highlight can help your team do what Once Upon a Farm does, we will drop a link in the chat, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you so much, Amanda. This was so much fun.
Thank you.